Kina Maarry.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone, as well from my side. Good afternoon. Like Tom mentioned, I'm currently leading the data teams at GotPhoto. But prior to that, I worked at two scale-ups, HelloFresh, the giant industry meal kit, and Prima, which is the leading motor insurance company in Italy. And I was lucky that I was at the right time where they transitioned to data mesh, and I was leading there the data governance efforts, working with the data strategy, and also working on the transformation and the change management that needs to happen. And today I want to tell you a little bit about how you can successfully not start, but maybe rethink the way that you are rolling out data products in your company. I'm also working in an advisory capacity within the data management company, where we advise different companies in the DACH region as they go throughout these journeys. And so a lot of the frameworks that you're going to be seeing here today, they're not theory. They are things that have been tested, and we've realized and learned from our mistakes that this is the way that works best. And I want us to move away from the thinking of building single data products, because at the end, there is still a lot of investment involved when you want to push out data products. You need to get the buy-in from the business domains. You need teams that start maintaining these data products. So when you speak to the business, you need to be able to show the business value. And that's very hard to justify by single data products. And so one thing that we've learned along the way is you need to start looking at the bigger picture. Not the single data products. These are valuable and you need to look at, but you need to start thinking about value chains. And value chains are thinking about what is the business driving to do, and extrapolate from that and think about what is the data flow up to that use case. So we're going to talk about how you can identify that, how you can prioritize that, how you can think about where you should be investing your time and energy, because I think all of you know there's still a lot of effort that needs to be done when creating data products. We're still not at that level where we have a platform where it's really out of the box. We're getting there, but we're still not there yet. So we need to think and be very ruthless in prioritizing that. So I'll take you over the idea of which data products should you be investing in. We'll talk about that in the value chain, and then I want us to go a little bit deeper and we'll talk about the single data products. Some of the aspects that I'll touch on today is how to make sure that they're valuable and usable. There are other aspects, but given the time constraints, we'll focus on those two. And then, at the end, I want to talk to you about the organization that is needed, because I'm still seeing a lot of companies struggling with that. All right, so one thing that we're realizing working with different companies, as I was at HelloFresh, as I was at Prima, working with other data leaders, you tend to see this typical power distribution where 10% of the data in the company is in fact unlocking 80% of the value. And you tend to have this long tail, a lot of data that is being gathered, not much value there. And then you have some data in the middle, around 30%, that is valuable. It's important for some use cases. But here, this is where you want to invest your time and effort. This is where you want to focus on. And that means not all data is born equally, and as such, we should also be treating them differently. Not everything should be a data product. If you've reached a state where you have now the data products for the most valuable data that you have, by all means you can continue. But don't start here. Don't start here. Start over here. And don't build single data products. Build on top data products that are interconnected so you can show a path and show the value. So one way to look at it is to have some kind of a value-based classification. This is something that I've worked with in the past. Call it as you wish, right? Those 10%, these are things that we are deeming as very important, very valuable, very impactful. These are the data products. They unlock many use cases. Then you have, remember the 30% data assets? Call them as you want. These are important data that you have in the company, relevant for some use cases. So you want to apply minimum standards there that you think of, but you don't need the interoperability and all the maintenance and management and product thinking that you would put into data products. And then over here, you can think about deleting those, or if you need to keep them, compliance. But don't put too much effort here. We all have a lot on our plate, and we need to be working on what truly matters. So when you go about identifying data value chains, and I'll give you an example shortly to see how a value chain might look like. And a data value chain is a data flow from source to a business use case. So first you have an understanding now internally within your team, the focus, what we're going to be focusing on, right? This value-based classification. And then the next thing is you need to identify the high-value use cases in the company. Short-term goals, long-term goals. Here, let's focus on the short-term goals of a company. And that might look like, this year we want to improve our customer acquisition rate. So marketing is going to be doing personalized campaigns. This is one use case. So you work your way down and you start looking at, okay, what data do I need? Customers' data, campaign data. Map that data value chain. And the important thing here is, because this is a bit tricky, in the fact that a lot of people go down that rabbit hole, don't get stuck on every single transformation along the way. Abstract it a little bit. So map those data value chains across the use cases, and like that you get a priority. Once you identify a value chain that you want to work on, start to understand as well, maybe top 3, start investing time in understanding what are the problems that I need to mitigate, and maybe do a reprioritization based on the amount of work that is required. You always want to balance speed and quality here. Right? This is something that we've worked with and has proven to be successful in the past. Now, as you are working on these data value chains, and I wanted to give you an abstraction here. This is extremely simplified, and it will always look much more messy, more complicated. But you'll start to see, as you're working with data products, and I think this was a question that was raised in Kieran's talk in the morning, we were having a lot of problems internally at companies explaining what a data product is. And we started at HelloFresh. We were the second company in Berlin that implemented data mesh after Zalando. And it was everything. And when data product is everything, it also becomes nothing. And explaining to business, oh, it's an output port, it's an input port, you lose them. And so a framework that we've been discussing, and this is in the Berlin data mesh community, and the first time that I heard about this was from Nadine von Heidelberg von Mindful, was the idea of, well, what about we start putting a bit of a framework around it? And some of you might look at the different types of products here and feel scared. And you're thinking, I'm already struggling describing what a data product is. Do you want me to go out and talk about all of these types of products? You don't need to introduce that from the beginning. You can simply start talking about data products. But there is a lot of value in slowly introducing other types of products, because you'll see that different products need to be maintained differently and will have different standards. And I'll tell you that in a minute, what that means. But let's go a little bit over here on the value chain. You will have source data products, and this is the point of creation, the first time this data is being exposed. And then you will have so many curated data products on top of those. Curated data product is nothing but a data product that is created on top of other data products. Could be combining multiple, could be one data product that is being enriched with extra business logic or extra transformation. On top of that, add, and this is downstream, right? Metric products, think of this as the KPI, the metric definition. And the reason why this is a product is you don't look just at the metric, you look at the metric, the definition, the data that's powering that metric. Analytic products, that's a dashboard. But if you apply product thinking, as we know from data mesh, this is not just the dashboard. It's the dashboard, it's the logic in the dashboard, it's the metadata, it's the standards that you should be applying, it's the materialized views that is powering that dashboard. AI, ML products, the model, the predictors, the training data. And as you hear me talking about these different products, you'll start to see that they are different. And the way you want to manage them and communicate to the organization roles and responsibilities around those are going to be different. And if you start talking about a dashboard as a data product, or completely ignoring it and not trying to bring that product thinking there, then you're missing something, I think. You're missing an opportunity. Because I believe product thinking should be brought across the value chain. What good is it if we're providing and exposing a perfect source data product, and at the end, the dashboards that are built on top of it, they're not maintained. The materialized views that are powering those, they're not maintained. They're not following standards. It's a shame. So when you start looking at these different products, right, you'll see different roles are actually responsible for creating these types of products. And the beauty of this is you can start to actually train and onboard people what actually their responsibility is, what is expected of them, how to bring product thinking into the product that they are actually exposing to the business. And this has worked really well for me. A recommendation is, when you start rolling this out, talk about source data products. Slowly start to see which groups in your company are more open to being onboarded, have that product thinking already inherent, and then start to introduce those. I typically start with source data products. I sneak in metric products and analytic products because this is where C-levels start seeing a lot of value. And then the curated data products come into play later on because they're actually the same standards. Doesn't matter. Good, so we've talked a little bit about very briefly, and I hope that gives you already a different mindset. When you're creating data products, think about the bigger picture. You start building single data products, but try and, when you're building the next one, to build on top of the first one that you have, because then you get a better story as you're showing them finally, look what we've done. This is the value of that data product. And it becomes very difficult to talk about the value of a source data product if you cannot actually connect it and show, this is where we started from the customer data. Now you can actually unlock your marketing campaign end to end. So let's take a step below now. Let's start talking about the single data products and some of the characteristics that you might want to take into account. And a lot of my colleagues here, a lot of the wonderful speakers already went into some of those aspects. I'll only talk about the valuable and usable aspect, but obviously you want to be thinking about making a data product compliant, supported, managed, right? But let's focus today on being valuable and usable. To make sure that the data product is valuable, obviously you need to start by understanding who are your data customers. Why are you building these data products? And this is what a data product manager's role is all about. Getting the requirements, seeing what is feasible, so that you build and expose that data product in a way that is useful. There's no use in exposing a data product where all of your customers internally need to do a lot of transformation to be able to use it. Second thing is, and this is the central data team, they need to define a standard for data products, and we'll deep dive a little bit in the next slide on how this minimal standard could look like. I'll show you the framework that I've been working with. Now, obviously, you want to have some KPIs. KPIs that are generic, that you can apply to test the value of data products in general, but you can also customize it for every particular data product if there is a need to. And obviously, a feedback loop. How is that data product being used? How much value is it bringing to the customers and the stakeholders that I've identified in the first round? And you'll see I'm always trying to break it down very simply in very easy terms, 1, 2, 3, 4, because you need to be able to communicate that, not only to your data teams, but also to the business, to data product managers. Obviously, you need to see who your audience is and try and make it as easy as possible. So some of the minimal standards for a data product, I'm not going to go through all of them. And again, throughout the conference, I'm pretty sure a lot of the speakers went into the details specifically as well on how to implement those. But some of the things, obviously, you need ownership of the principles. Description, make sure the descriptions are actionable. If you think about an analytics product, remember that dashboard, you want to include the metric definition, for instance, so you link to the metric definition, people understand what they're looking at. If you're looking at a metric product, talk about the query that is being used, the calculation formula, how fresh the data is. Right, so add descriptions that add value to the people that are looking at it. Make it as business-friendly as possible. Basic lineage, interoperability, right? Everything I think that you would want, and use that as a checklist. This is something that your data platform team need to take into account, try and automate that, create workflows, create a user experience that is easy. We want to reach a stage where it's really a click. I haven't seen that yet. I'm seeing some companies who are getting there, but there's still a bit of improvement, and maybe as well with agentic AI, I'm seeing also some use cases where even data quality is being handled there. I saw a demo the last few days that was pretty powerful. So this is a bit on making it valuable. The next thing I want to talk about, making it usable. Because if it's not usable, there's no purpose in creating that data product. So first thing is, think about how you make them findable, right? So of course there's the data catalog, but think about naming conventions. Think about creating, like I said, business-friendly descriptions. Highlight or certify. A lot of these catalogs have like these gold certificate that you can add on, or you can create a landing page per domain where the top data products are visible, right? Try and make them as findable as possible. Highlight them. I know some teams that actually do a bit of PR around them. Whenever they're exposing a data product, there's a newsletter that is being sent out. Make data products easy to consume. Right? Check, and this again depends on the product. You'll see that I'm talking about data products. I'm not breaking them down to the different products that I talked about at the beginning. This is to make it a little bit more general, but you can take that and break it down accordingly. You want to make data products understandable, right? What does it mean? What are the use cases this is used for? What are the sources? How is it calculated, like I mentioned before? And you want it to be easily combinable, and this is where the interoperability comes into play, which is harder than you would think. And this is where a federated data governance team needs to put in a lot of heavy lifting to make sure that you have joint dimensions, you have defined formats, right? You have standardized APIs. Now, the last thing that I want to touch upon today is the organization around it, because I'm still seeing a lot of organization really getting stuck there. And the reason for that is there's a multitude of reasons depending on the company and organization that you're in. But one of them is maybe you're not getting the budget. But another thing, and I'm seeing that more often as I speak with different companies, but also the companies that I've worked in, it's not very clear the roles and responsibilities, because it's not clear what a data product is, possibly. And often you end up with this army of part-time volunteers. And in fact, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And it doesn't help you. So yes, for the MVP, for the first and the second data product, by all means. But once you get that buy-in for that first business domain, for that first data domain, make sure that you have set up this for success by having the right staffing, by having the right capabilities there to support that. And I'll tell you in a minute how that usually looks like, well, the minimum that you need. So when you want to set up your organization to manage and maintain data products, the maintenance here is very important. It's part of product thinking. It's not about shipping and throwing it over the fence and never thinking about it again, but it's a continuous thing. It's your product. You need to see how is it being used, how can I improve it. You need a central data team, and the central data team moves away from its previous role as being hands-on, as being the team doing the heavy lifting, and they move towards the enablement role. They move towards the role of building the platform, providing the services, providing the frameworks. You have your business domains and you've clarified the accountability there and what it means. And then you need to staff the domain teams. And this is where I see a big gap. And also in conferences, there's still a bit of talks about, okay, data steward versus the data product manager. And I'll tell you my take on this, what worked for me in the past, in the present. And then finally, and we'll go a little bit in depth here in the next slide, decision bodies. So this is something that I've gotten my hand burned a couple of times. And we've tried a couple of things in different companies. And I think we've come up with a solution here that works. And that is what typically you would have as a data council, right? Where you have a representative from each business domain. Now that works fine up to a point where you start losing people's interests, because sometimes you need to focus on a particular domain, you need to focus on a particular product. So customer products is typically one of the culprits where there is a lot of stakeholders involved. And so yes, you can get around by sending an agenda saying, today we're going to be talking about this. If you're not interested, don't join. But I found it extremely powerful to have a federated data council to talk about, okay, the standards, the formats, get everyone involved to talk the same language. But it has been extremely powerful to have as well sometimes councils that are dedicated for particular data product, like customer data product. And then you bring in all the stakeholders that are actually very much invested in that product because they rely on it a lot. That has been really an eye-opener, and we push for that whenever we see the need for that. So when we start talking about staffing domain teams, we have to be, as data leaders, loud and clear. And maybe you start with one domain and show the value of what that team is capable to do. But if we're pushing out that responsibility, we cannot expect it to be happening on the side. You need at least a data product manager, a data analyst, and a data engineer. Depending on what that domain does, you might need an AI engineer, you might need a data scientist. You cannot get away without those roles. Business data stewards, we've found them extremely valuable as a person who's already in the business domain, who is acting as a translator or who is actually sharing this knowledge on the business aspect, on the business context. And they work then with that operational data team within the domain. And data stewards could then be part-time. I also have to admit that there's also a bit of a mental side to it. There's a lot of organizations, specifically a bit of the older organizations, a little bit traumatized with data stewards. And so typically we don't push for that role as a full-time. If you have an operational data team already in the domain, that suffices. So it's not really about building single data products. It's really about thinking about what is the company trying to do? How am I, as a data leader, supporting them with this new approach? Right? Why should domains start building their data products? And if you can have this success story along a value chain, it's really powerful. It's really impactful. And to do that, you need to start thinking more closely about the roles and responsibilities around it, the teams that need to support that, because at the end of the day, it's accountability, and your role there is enablement. Whether it's with trainings, by making it very clearly what are the standards, what are the expectations, providing the tooling, continuously working on the tooling to make it as easy as possible. And I hope, and I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I'm seeing a lot of vendors as well that are joining forces right now to try and make an ecosystem, to try and make a user experience, rather than having to plug all of these tools together to try and come up with this platform experience. But we're getting there. Thank you all for your attention. And if you have any questions, happy to take them here or over lunch.
Thank you, Kina.